deregulation in the financial markets. Capital itself has always been looking to spread risk around. It's always been looking to privatize profits, socialize losses. It does this whenever it can. Neoliberalism made it easier for this to happen, especially vis-a-vis real estate, collateralized debt obligations, and so on. If we do want to point the finger at neoliberalism specifically in this crisis, I think we should remember when we do so the importance of states, the American state, the Canadian state, the British state, and so on, in this process. Some of you in your classes may have an understanding of neoliberalism as somehow separate from state intervention, that it's that on the one hand you have state intervention, such as with the Keynesian economy, and on the other hand you have states pulling away in neoliberalism. But so much of what has happened to the economy, to workers, to society in general under neoliberalism has been directed through state policy. We see this in the way risk is spread around. We see it in the very deliberate breaking of organized labor in the United States from 79 to 82. The slashing of public expenditures. Government policies that ensure workers, especially in the United States, but to some extent in Canada, work longer and harder. Most of you who are students have to work as well as go to school. This is a new development, and it has to do with government policies about education. So all of these ways that neoliberalism has structured our lives that cause social crisis, in fact, that parallels the economic crisis and plays into it, have been to some extent state-driven, and they have a long history through capital. So that's just a little gloss on the history, and hopefully in the conversation we can talk more about where the crisis came from. I don't want to take too much time here, but I want to highlight a few elements of the present moment that we're in. I think all of us up here agree now that things have more or less stopped getting worse, but they're not getting markedly better economically. The green shoots that you keep hearing about, they're not green shoots so much as plants have stopped wilting, right? And nobody's watering them. Have you ever seen what happens to a plant when you just let it dry up and then don't water it? It just sort of sits there. It doesn't. So it's not dying back anymore now. You saw the news this morning. U.S. GDP growth 3.5%. Woohoo! The recession's over. Well, no, of course not. Or at least the impact of the recession isn't over. All of that growth comes out of government spending in the United States. There's no self-sustaining momentum in the economy right now. And on top of all this, we can think about openings. We have to think about openings for fundamentally restructuring the system, fundamentally making finance different than it has been. Neoliberal ideology, as we've heard, is no longer unquestioned. This is one of the great things about the crisis. For most of us, there had been an unfaltering belief in the free market, the perfection of the private sector, the efficiency of the private sector. All of these ideas are on the rocks right now. But here's the pessimistic side of this. So what? What's replacing these ideas? We're still thinking inside the box to a large extent. Why are we stuck thinking inside the box? I think we have to make a distinction between crises that are of capital's making and crises that are the result of labor struggles, crises that are the result of resistance in some sense. This crisis seems to me to be a crisis stemming primarily from the internal dynamics of capital. These kinds of crises can be transformative, but the way they transform society and the economy is in order to provide temporary stability to capitalist accumulation. You get a new regime of accumulation at the other end of it. You don't get a democratized economy. You don't get a democratized finance. Labor and social movements more generally are stuck playing catch-up. We haven't been mobilizing in advance of the crisis in order to replace the systems of finance, only to tweak them. And so we're stuck now trying to tweak a system that's fundamentally broken. It seems to me there's a very narrow window that we have in a crisis like this in which to avoid restoration of just regular Keynesian model or full-on restoration of neoliberalism.